This is Group 1 for INFX 531, presenting our Dublin Core application profile for the Criterion collection.
In choosing a collection, we considered what type of collection would give a sufficient amount of detail to to justify using Dublin Core. About the Criterion collection, the collection has been dedicated to curating the greatest films from around the world for over 25 years. The company is committed to publishing the defining moments of cinema for a wider and wider audience. The collection presently contains over 650 distinct core titles and another 250 miscellaneous special collections and film versions. The core titles are assigned spine numbers when they are included in the collection, indicating to serious collectors the chronology of inclusion, but the special collections and other versions are left unnumbered. Film aficionados look for very specific data when they are researching a film. Some might be interested in aspect ratio, others may focus on films in a particular language, and still others focus on the works of certain actors, directors, and writers. And Criterion details that information for its audience because it recognizes the importance of catering to a variety of information needs. Additions in the primary collection include a plethora of bonus features from interviews, documentaries, and featurettes to alternative endings and deleted scenes. As such, the company draws material from many sources other than just the film itself to provide a complete film experience for the viewer. Dublin Core is an appropriate base metadata set precisely due to the level of detail it affords. Criterion provides its audience with incredibly detailed information about every film in its collection, and using Dublin Core to describe the collection allows users to search at the same level of specificity. That being said, some aspects of describing a collection like this exceed Dublin Core's capabilities, and some concepts needed to be borrowed or created to fully describe the collection. Terms from filmstandards.org filled in for industry-specific descriptions for general film data, like runtime, color, and carrier information, but there were still certain elements of the Criterion collection that were not completely described for our users. We want users to be able to search for people either by their real names or their roles, be that as cast or crew. Even though we could not imagine the person who would search by aspect ratio, we treated it as an important piece of data that a certain audience might be interested in and wanted to provide that functionality. Still others, in the process of building their collections, might be interested in being able to search for the preceding and succeeding films by spine number, an identifier not typically used by metadata schemas in the same way Criterion uses it. To allow for these particular needs, we also developed a short local record. And moving on to metadata structure and encoding.
So as we mentioned before, the base set of terms for this schema was the Dublin Core. We chose that, as mentioned before, for the level of detail it allowed. And then we supplemented it with a schema that we found on the website filmstandards.org that provides industry-specific terms that are a little bit more appropriate to the genre of films. We also liked that it was a widely available schema, so we preferred to use that for some of the more specific film-related terms in order to increase interoperability. We did, however, still need to define some local terms that were specific to Criterion, such as the spine number, and we also decided to define our cast and credit terms in a little bit different way than the filmstandards.org schema because of the way that Criterion collection goes into such detail about things like gastronomic consultant, which wasn't really very well represented in the filmstandards.org schema. So our application profile very simply starts with a Criterion collection as the root element or base element, and then you can have as many film records within that collection. We didn't set the limit at the current number of Criterion films simply because they're constantly adding films and we want to allow that to be used as long as they added films to the collection. We divided it up further into three parts. First, there's the Criterion DC record, which are the terms that we pulled from the Dublin Core schema directly. We also pulled in, as we mentioned before, some of our own local terms, and that's what is populated into the Criterion film collection record. And finally, we pulled in a few elements specifically from the film standards, filmstandards.org standard, and we grouped those three together, though we did not place them in their own container. So just a little bit about the Dublin core schema. We included in ours, it includes all Dublin core elements as optional, 0 to unbounded elements. Not all the Dublin core elements are needed for a Criterion record, but they're all included in case a need in a specific implementation were to arise. For our Dublin core schema, we chose to employ substitution groups. With substitution groups, more refined element names can be substituted for less refined ones. This way, you don't necessarily have a container that is called description and then abstract within that container. Rather, substituted for description would be the element abstract if that were the most useful element in that situation. This allows for a little bit more flexibility with how a specific implementation might want to use it. The local terms specifically that we did choose to use here are title proper, which is based on the RDA version of title. We thought that was a little more informative than Dublin Core's simple title. And we also didn't feel that we were going to need to use alternative title very often, so we felt it was useful to define that title proper. We also included aspect ratio, like we mentioned before. That's a pretty important access point in some cases. Spine number, we did define our own date because in the form of the year element, because the other date elements were a bit too restrictive, and the Criterion collection generally only gives a year, so we thought that was important. And then we did, as you can see in the diagram, organize cast and credits in a way that would be really flexible for capturing all the information Criterion collection makes available. For filmstandards.org, we took the following three elements: duration type, carrier type, and film color, and mostly we utilized those for the built-in complex types that we thought were very fitting to our domain. And the element type for duration is set up as a specifically entered duration rather than a string, again, because of the way that Criterion collection likes to represent the length of their films. They do it in minutes specifically rather than hours, so we needed to make sure it was restricted to reflect that. Going on to the rest of our restrictions, film color was restricted to a specific set. Aspect ratio, again, must be set in the specific pattern that is used when the Criterion collection is described. And again, we limited duration time to the specific Criterion format of minutes.
Okay, so now we're going to take you through one of the examples or one of the instances in our assignment. We're going to first look at, I'm going to tell you about our 5 films. We chose these 5 specifically because we wanted to illustrate the variety of different DVD in the Criterion collection and how the application profile is going to be representing the collection. So we decided to go with topsy-turvy. As you can see here in the synopsis, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, they're listing the country, the year, how long the movie is, what the color type is, the aspect ratio, and what language the film is in, and then also the spine number, since that's a very important thing for collectors. And then we just have a little bit of abstract for the film. Here, we also wanted to show that there's a cast and there's a credit section. And as you can see, in the cast, you have the name of the character, and then you have the name of the actor. And as for the credits, there's some pretty standard ones, such as director, written by producer. But as you go down the list, it gets a little bit more specific and specialized specifically for this movie. So that's that. And now we're going to basically show you how the instance works. Okay, so here's our instance. Like we had mentioned before, the XML schema is divided into the Dublin core schema, and then our local schema, and then finally the 3 film standard types that we decided to use for the collection. It's pretty straightforward. It's simple. We didn't use too many containers, and let's see. I think that's all I can really talk about our schema. It's pretty straightforward. There's only about 15, 16 elements. It's simple. Okay. Okay, malfunction. And then the last thing we wanted to talk about is basically things that, if we had a little bit more time, we could have changed or tested, and some design choices that we made. So the first one that's obvious is why did we choose substitution groups versus containers? I think we decided to go with substitution groups because our collection is, the metadata that is needed to be entered is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. If it was a collection that had more detail, I think containers might have been more appropriate. And then, there's also a debate whether we should have used an element and then define the film standards within that element, or if an element group was just enough for this collection, and we went with the latter because there was only 3 complex types that we borrowed from the film standards, so we thought that we didn't need to have the container. And if we had more time, we would have wanted maybe to define our own duration type, since the film standard already defines the duration using one of the encoding schemes. And finally, maybe the Dublin core schema is not the most appropriate base schema for this collection. So, yeah, that's pretty much all we wanted to say for reflection.
And that is a presentation by Lauren Letts, Sarah McCall, and Ann Wen, with slides by Anthony Wright. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.